Picture this vivid scene for a moment. It is mid-1968, and we are standing on the front lawn of a modest apartment building in El Cerrito, California.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
And right there, completely unbothered by anyone who might be watching, a 23-year-old John Fogerty is turning absolute, joyous, celebratory cartwheels across the grass.
I mean, that is just the physical manifestation of pure, unadulterated relief, you know?
Yeah.
The weight of the world has quite literally just been lifted off his shoulders.
Exactly, yeah. And the trigger for these acrobatic celebrations is this official-looking envelope resting on his doorstep. Inside that envelope is his honorable discharge from the United States Army Reserves.
Which is huge.
Oh, it's massive. Think about the cultural atmosphere of mid-1968. The draft is looming over every young man, the Vietnam War is escalating violently, and the constant suffocating anxiety of deployment is just this dark cloud over an entire generation.
Right. And now, for Fogerty, it is suddenly, definitively over.
Yeah.
He runs back inside his apartment, grabs his Rickenbacker guitar, and he channels that massive burst of adrenaline and physical freedom into one of the most famous opening lines in rock history.
Lift a good job in the city.
Yeah. But we have to stop right there and completely recontextualize that famous lyric for you. Because if you grew up listening to this song on classic rock radio, you probably assumed that line is a standard blue-collar resignation.
Oh, for sure. You picture a guy who is just, fed up with his corporate 9-to-5 job, packing up his desk to go live off the grid.
Exactly. But historically and biographically, it is not a corporate resignation at all.
Not even close. That good job in the city where he was working for the man every night and day, that is a direct anti-authoritarian celebration of escaping military conscription.
The man isn't a CEO.
No, the man is Uncle Sam. Fogerty is singing about the institutional, unyielding rigidity of the military-industrial complex. He is celebrating his escape from the machine.
Which means we need to abruptly pivot from the lyrics to the underlying music theory here.
Oh, please do.
Because while the words are grounded in this very American mid-century draft escape narrative, how that escape actually sounds is rooted in classical European history.
Wait, really?
Yeah. That iconic descending intro, the heavy chugging sequence that grabs you by the collar the second the needle drops on the record, is Fogerty literally translating the dramatic opening motif of Ludwig van Beethoven's Fifth Symphony.
Oh man, we absolutely have to geek out over the mechanics of this. I mean, Beethoven's Fifth gives us the most famous four notes in all of classical music. It is a dramatic descending third motif.
Right.
So Fogerty takes that classical movement, specifically shifting from a C major chord down to an A major chord, and he physically wrestles it into a blues rock guitar format.
And the physical translation is where the magic really happens, specifically regarding the gear he used. Fogerty played this classical motif on a hollow body Gibson ES 175 electric guitar.
A great guitar.
Beautiful instrument. But the crucial decision, the absolute secret sauce of this track, is that he intentionally detuned that guitar down a full step to D standard.
Let's explain why that matters to you as a listener, because changing the tuning completely alters the physics of the instrument. When you drop a guitar's tuning down a full step, you are removing a significant amount of physical tension from the strings themselves.
They get all loose.
Yeah, they become slinkier, almost floppy.
And because they lack that tight tension when you strike them, the strings vibrate in a much wider physical arc. That wider vibration creates a heavy, churning, low-end resonance.
It's so visceral.
It is. So when he plays those descending Beethoven chords, they don't sound pristine or classically tight. The heavy, muddy vibration perfectly mimics the deep, mechanical, splashing turn of a 19th century riverboat's paddle wheel pushing its way through the water.
Welcome to Deep Cuts and Deep Thinking.
Glad to be here.
So, now that we have dropped you right onto the muddy banks of the river, let's lay out our mission for this deep dive. Our goal is to explore how a song born entirely from military avoidance transformed into a universal global anthem. We're going to unpack the incredibly toxic studio dynamics behind its creation, explore its radical reinvention by legendary Black artists, and walk through the exhausting 50-year legal nightmare Fogerty endured just to own his own creation.
What makes this entire journey so fascinating to me is the disconnect between the raw emotion and the fictional landscape it inhabits. I mean, that burst of literal physical freedom on the El Cerrito lawn didn't result in a protest song about the army.
Right, he didn't write Fortunate Son right there.
Exactly. That specific emotion was instead channeled into an entirely mythological setting.
And we can trace that mythology back to a cheap drugstore notebook from the summer of 1967. Fogerty bought it just to jot down stray ideas. The very first entry in that notebook, with absolutely no story and no melody attached, was simply the title, Proud Mary.
Just the words.
Just the words. But if you peeked into his mind at that moment, you wouldn't see a boat. Fogerty initially imagined Mary as a domestic washerwoman or a maid. She was a working-class woman riding a public bus to go clean houses for wealthy people.
Which makes sense, given his background.
Yeah, this early concept was heavily influenced by a song he actually wrote when he was 8 years old called Wash Day Blues.
The conceptual leap from this domestic laborer to the grand riverboat we all know was actually triggered by Creedence Clearwater Revival's bass guitar player, Stu Cook.
Oh, I love this story.
It's so random. They were just hanging out in their apartment watching the classic television Western Maverick. During the show, Stu spots a paddle wheeler on the screen and casually throws out the line, "Hey, Riverboat, blow your bell."
That one casual comment flips the switch. Fogerty realizes in that instant that Proud Mary wasn't the washerwoman getting off the bus. Proud Mary was the boat itself.
It just pivots the whole concept.
Right, and he brilliantly takes the physical, exhausting labor of a washerwoman's churning laundry and transforms it into the relentless, mechanical turning of a riverboat wheel.
But stepping back, this creative breakthrough reveals an incredible geographical paradox at the heart of the band's identity. Creedence Clearwater Revival created the definitive, quintessential swamp rock sound.
Absolutely.
The song is packed with vivid, sweaty, authentic-sounding references to Memphis, New Orleans, and pumping propane in town. Yet these were 4 kids from the suburban San Francisco Bay Area.
Yeah.
At the time he wrote this definitive Southern anthem, Fogerty had never even seen the Mississippi River. He had never traveled east of Montana.
Okay, let's unpack this because it defies logic. This is like a method actor winning an Academy Award for a highly specific cultural role based entirely on a character they imagined while staring at beige apartment walls in California. It's bizarre. How does an imagined, fictionalized South feel more deeply authentic to millions of people than the real thing?
Well, you have to view it through the lens of a highly anxious Vietnam-era America. By 1969, the country is fractured.
Totally broken.
The public is reeling from political assassinations, violent riots, urban decay, and of course the draft. The culture desperately craved this idealized, pre-industrial pastoral fantasy. Fogerty wasn't offering a geography lesson, he was offering an emotional escape route.
Wow. Yeah.
The authenticity people felt wasn't in the specific coordinates of the Mississippi River. It was in the shared longing for a simpler, supportive community, safely hidden away from the man.
And the lyrics practically serve as a brochure for that utopia. He sings, "People on the river are happy to give. It's a promise of a generous, protective community." However, that beautiful communal message stands in stark, almost brutal contrast to the highly rigid, deeply uncommunal reality of how the song was actually brought to life in the studio.
Oh, the recording process was the exact opposite of a relaxed riverboat journey. Let's step inside RCA Studios, Studio A in Hollywood. It is October 1968, and they are working with recording engineer Hank McGill.
A legendary room.
For sure. And tracking the instruments for this song is a masterclass in sonic architecture. You have John's detuned Gibson ES-175 plugged directly into a high-wattage custom K 200A amplifier. Crucially, this amplifier featured a built-in treble boost circuit.
And that specific piece of gear is the key to the whole sound. If you just detune a guitar, the lower string tension makes it sound muddy. It can easily get lost in the recording mix as just a dull rumble.
Right, it turns to mush.
But by running that loose string through a treble boost circuit, it acts like a sonic machete. It slices right through the low-end mud, giving the note a sharp, aggressive bite over the rumble.
Exactly. The treble boost forces the clarity. And he is playing that aggressive, muddy tone against Tom Fogerty's Rickenbacker 330, which is intentionally kept in standard E-tuning.
So you have 2 completely different feels.
Right. Combining these 2 distinct tonal voicings creates a massive multi-octave wall of sound that feels much larger than 2 guitars. You add in Stu Cook's pulsing bass line and John's incredibly economic rhythmic lead guitar solo, which he consciously modeled after the minimalist genius of Steve Cropper from Stax Records, and the instrumental foundation is flawless.
But the flawless foundation cracks when it is time to record the vocals. This brings us to the infamous 2 Guys from Italy incident.
Oh boy.
Yeah. The instrumental tracks are laid down, and Tom, Stu, and Doug get on the studio microphones to nail the backing harmonies. But John, who has essentially appointed himself as the sole producer and absolute dictator of these sessions, hates their takes.
He was relentless.
He finds them pitchy, uninspired, and completely unacceptable. The tension boils over, and the other 3 band members simply leave the studio to go get dinner at a local Italian restaurant called 2 Guys from Italy.
And while his bandmates are down the street eating pasta, John doesn't take a break. He stays behind in the control room. He completely erases their vocal tracks from the master tape.
Just wipes them out.
Wipes them entirely.
Yeah.
And over the next 45 minutes, alone in the studio, he meticulously layers his own voice over and over again to build a one-man choir. You have to remember, tape bouncing in 1968 is an incredibly tedious, technical process requiring perfect pitch and timing.
It's so hard to do.
He was desperately trying to mimic the powerful, sweeping harmonies of the black gospel quartets he deeply admired, like the Swan Silvertones. He deliberately sang the word rolling with this guttural, explosive RR rolling from the back of his throat to capture that authentic gospel shout.
Hearing this, you really have to question the line between artistic genius and toxic behavior. On one hand, you have a brilliant producer fiercely protecting his sonic vision, refusing to compromise.
True.
On the other hand, you have a control freak alienating his own band. It is like a film director locking his entire cast out of the theater, putting on different wigs, and playing all the supporting parts himself because he doesn't trust anyone else.
The outcome is completely polarized, depending on whether you look at the art or the artists. Sonically, his autocratic method worked perfectly. It is a masterpiece of vocal layering. But relationally,
A disaster.
Total disaster. This level of intense micromanagement absolutely planted the deep, bitter seeds for the band's dissolution just a few years later. The other members realized they were being treated as disposable backing musicians rather than creative partners in their own band.
The general public, of course, couldn't hear the internal resentment bleeding through the vinyl. The single was a massive commercial smash, but it immediately fell victim to what chart historians call the number 2 curse.
Yes.
It reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 in March 1969, but it was blocked from the absolute top spot by Sly and the Family Stone and Tommy Roe. Incredibly, this would become a recurring theme. It was just the first of 5 separate Creedence singles to hit #2 without ever reaching #1.
The ultimate irony of Fogerty's studio dictatorship is that while he controlled every single note, breath, and overdub in that room, the moment the song was released to the public, he lost that control entirely. Other brilliant artists immediately recognized the structural flexibility of that driving rhythm.
They saw the potential.
They realized they could bend the song's architecture to fit entirely different lived experiences.
There are well over 100 recorded covers of Proud Mary, but 2 of them completely rewrote the song's cultural DNA.
The first major tectonic shift happened in April 1969, mere weeks after the original peaked on the charts. Country soul pioneer Solomon Burke recorded his own version.
Such a great version.
It really is. Burke took this white Californian folktale and deeply recontextualized the entire narrative. He added a brilliant spoken word intro that explicitly framed the Proud Mary Riverboat not just as a vessel of freedom, but as a ship worked by generations of enslaved African Americans.
He grounds it in reality.
Yes. He specifically calls out the stokers, the cooks, and the waiters sweating below deck. With that single thematic addition, Burke transformed a song about escaping a military draft into a profound, haunting anthem of Black historical consciousness and generational struggle.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because Burke's spoken word framing directly laid the groundwork for what Ike and Tina Turner would accomplish in 1971.
Oh, absolutely.
Ike Turner was initially inspired to tackle the song after hearing a massive, heavily orchestrated Phil Spector-produced cover by a group called the Checkmates Ltd. Ike took that inspiration and completely overhauled the arrangement specifically for the Ike and Tina Turner review.
The Turner's version is a masterclass in structural tension and euphoric release. They took Fogerty's steady riverboat groove and violently divided it into 2 distinct musical movements. It starts with Tina's iconic sultry spoken intro, teasing the audience that they're going to start the song nice and easy, but promising to finish it nice and rough.
And then, right at the halfway mark, you get this abrupt whiplash tempo pivot. The laid-back groove completely disintegrates, and the song explodes into a frantic 170 beats per minute funk rock frenzy.
When you hit that tempo pivot, the entire meaning of the song shifts again.
What's fascinating here is that the man completely shapeshifts depending on who is holding the microphone. Fogerty's man is the draft board and Uncle Sam. But when Tina Turner sings it at 170 beats per minute, you realize the man is the literal racialized labor system of the segregated South.
Right.
And on an even darker, much more intimate level, the man is her abusive husband and band leader, Ike Turner.
That is the sheer power of gender and racial reclamation. For Tina Turner, working for the man wasn't a metaphor. It was the crushing reality of the Chitlin circuit. When that tempo shifts into overdrive, her performance transcends the lyrics. It becomes a public, visceral display of physical mastery, supreme endurance, and ultimate female empowerment.
You can hear her fighting back.
The physical exertion required to perform at that tempo while dancing perfectly in sync is staggering. She is quite literally physically singing her way toward liberation right in front of the audience.
Which brings us to the most tragic, brutal irony woven through this entire history. Proud Mary is, at its core, a song about escaping oppressive structures. It is about leaving the man behind and finding the freedom of the river.
Yeah.
And yet the song itself was captured, locked in a vault, and held hostage by corporate legal machinery for half a century.
It remains the ultimate music industry cautionary tale regarding intellectual property. When the band members were just naive kids in their early 20s, they signed a disastrous predatory recording contract with Saul Zaentz and Fantasy Records.
Just a terrible deal.
Without proper legal representation to warn them, they ceded the global publishing rights to their own music in perpetuity. Fogerty's relationship with Zaentz and the label grew so deeply toxic that by 1980, out of pure desperation, Fogerty actually surrendered all of his future songwriter royalties for the entire catalog just to legally buy his way out of the contract.
Think about the gravity of that decision. He essentially gave away the rights to one of the greatest American songbooks ever written, just to be free of the man who owned it. But Zaentz wasn't done tormenting him.
Not at all.
In 1985, we get one of the most absurd, surreal legal battles in music history. Fogerty releases a successful solo comeback album, and Zaentz sues him for $144 million. The basis of the lawsuit. Zaentz claimed that Fogerty's new solo song, The Old Man Down the Road, plagiarized the old Creedence hit Run Through the Jungle.
To put that in plain terms, the owner of the publishing rights was suing John Fogerty for plagiarizing John Fogerty.
It is absolute madness. Because Fantasy Records owned the old song, they claimed Fogerty was stealing from their property by sounding like himself. This leads to an incredible moment in a federal courtroom where John Fogerty actually brings his guitar to the witness stand.
I wish there was video of this.
I know, right? He sits under oath and plays both songs live for the federal jury to physically prove that the chord progressions and melodies were fundamentally different. He eventually wins the copyright case, but he was so infuriated by the financial bullying that he took the fight for his legal fees all the way to the United States Supreme Court.
And he won there, too, establishing a massive, enduring legal precedent for the rights of independent artists.
Such a huge victory.
It was. But the personal, psychological toll of that 50-year war was devastating. Because of the intense bitterness associated with his own art, Fogerty refused to play his own Creedence songs live for over 15 years. He simply wouldn't touch Proud Mary. It brought up too much pain.
That silence lasted until a legendary 1987 jam session at the Palomino Club in North Hollywood. Fogerty is in the audience, and on stage are George Harrison, Taj Mahal, and Bob Dylan.
What a lineup.
Right. Dylan spots Fogerty, steps up to the microphone, and coaxes him to the stage with a very stark, very real warning. Dylan looks at him and says, "If you don't play it, the whole world is going to think Proud Mary is Tina Turner's song."
It was harsh, but it was exactly the wake-up call Fogerty needed to realize he was letting the legal trauma erase his own legacy. And after decades of legal wrangling, we could finally put a bow on this historical timeline. In January 2023, after a grueling 50-year struggle, John Fogerty finally purchased the majority interest in his own catalog.
He finally got it back.
He finally brought Proud Mary back home. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the journey of Proud Mary proves that art is fundamentally uncontrollable once it leaves a creator's hands. Whether you are a kid trying to escape the military draft in California, a legendary black singer fighting a toxic relationship on stage, or a songwriter battling predatory corporate contracts in a federal courthouse, the structural bones of a truly great idea will support whatever weight you need to put on it.
I love that. Think about the most authentic pieces of art, music, or literature that define who you are today. How many of them were created by people who had absolutely no lived experience of what they were creating? Does a song have to be factually true to be emotionally true? Are we all just hitching a ride on imagined riverboats to escape our own personal versions of the man?
Something to think about.
If you like this episode, please support the show by liking and subscribing.